Welcome to the Deep Dive. You brought us a really great set of materials today. Articles, papers, notes, and yeah, our mission is to dig right in.
Sounds good.
We're plunging into, well, the fascinating, sometimes pretty wild world of sexual selection. And the big question we're tackling is, why are some males, in the animal kingdom just so much more, well, flamboyant, more over the top than females?
It's a classic question in biology, definitely. And as the research you've gathered shows, the thinking on this has twisted and turned quite a bit.
Right.
We're basically tracing a story over, more than a century? From Darwin's first ideas through times when they were, frankly, dismissed.
Yeah.
And then arriving at some really revolutionary theories and some quite ingenious experiments.
Okay, so we want to help you make sense of it all, figure out what's really going on behind these, dramatic displays, the made choices we see everywhere.
From peacocks to, well, flies with eyes on stalks.
Exactly. We're talking Darwin's hunch about beauty, superglue on bird tails, sandflies singing in labs. It's quite a ride. Let's unpack this.
Okay, let's start right back with Darwin. 1871, The Descent of Man. He wasn't just talking natural selection, survival against the environment.
No, he proposed this other force, sexual selection, often driven by female choice.
Right. He even suggested female birds, like peahens, had something like an aesthetic sense. They preferred the most beautiful males.
Which must have been pretty radical then. Not just survival, but attractiveness itself shaping evolution.
Hugely radical. And as your notes show, not universally popular. Not by a long shot.
No. Who pushed back?
Well, some heavy hitters, people like Julian Huxley, even Alfred Wallace.
Wallace, who co-discovered natural selection with Darwin.
The very same. They really downplayed this female choice idea, argued male traits were more about, scaring off other males.
Or just species recognition, making sure you mate with the right kind of bird.
Exactly. That was the main thinking. Female choice was seen as, well, maybe a minor factor, if that.
So sexual selection was kind of seen as weak. Maybe a bit trivial.
Pretty much. And that skepticism lasted a long time. Even into the 1960s, you had figures like Konrad Lorenz.
Oh, yeah, the ecologist.
Right. He thought sexual selection could actually be bad for a species, lead them into blind alleys, he called it.
Like the Argus pheasant, with those ridiculously long feathers.
Precisely. Impractical, potentially harmful for survival. So the general feeling was quite negative about female choice as a major evolutionary driver. Lazy consensus, really.
Okay, so for decades, Darwin's aesthetic sense idea was kind of pushed aside. But your material mentions some early challenges to this, starting with Peter O'Donnell.
Yes, O'Donnell. He was a student of Ronald Fisher.
The famous geneticist.
That's him. And Fisher himself had actually proposed this runaway hypothesis much earlier, though it was also largely ignored then.
Right, the runaway idea. What was the basic concept there?
It's the idea that a female preference for a male trait and the trait itself could get linked genetically. So if females slightly prefer, say, a longer tail, their daughters tend to inherit that preference, and their sons tend to inherit the longer tail.
So it feeds back on itself.
Exactly. It creates this positive feedback loop. Both the preference and the trait can get exaggerated together, kind of running away.
So the preference makes the trait common, which makes having the preference better because your sons are sexier.
You got it. And O'Donnell started looking for evidence. He studied Arctic skua seabirds with different color forms, dark, light, intermediate.
And he found something.
He did. A clear pattern. The dark males, the most conspicuous ones, they found mates way faster. Like 6 days compared to 8 for intermediate or 11 for pale males.
Wow. That really suggests female preference was active even in a mostly monogamous bird.
It certainly challenged the idea it was only important in, lekking species with harems.
Right.
And O'Donnell also tried to build the theory. Back in '62, he published mathematical models showing Fisher's runaway idea could work genetically.
But they didn't catch on.
No, they were pretty obscure, complex maths ahead of its time. Didn't really break through the skepticism.
So even by the early 70s, a century after Darwin, sexual selection wasn't exactly mainstream thinking?
Not really. The big centennial volume on Descent of Man gave Darwin credit for human evolution, but was pretty quiet on sexual selection. Ernst Mayr mentioned O'Donnell briefly, but yeah.
But then came the turning point.
Yeah.
A young Harvard scientist, Robert Trivers.
Trivers, yes. He actually switched from social sciences, I think. His 1972 chapter was, a complete game changer.
Introducing parental investment.
Exactly. It seems, as one source put it, deceptively simple, but it was revolutionary. Triver's core idea focuses on how much each sex invests in reproduction.
Unequally, usually.
Right. And his rule was the sex investing less tends to compete more, does the proposing. The sex investing more is choosier, does this disposing.
And the story is he got this idea watching pigeons. Seriously.
That's the story. Apparently he watched two pairs. Males and females look identical, both feed the young, but the behavior was totally different. Males were super jealous, guarding their mates, chasing off rivals, trying to sneak matings with other females. The females, none of that.
Huh. Why the difference if they both raise the chicks?
Trivers said it boils down to the initial investment. Tiny sperm versus a big, costly egg. And then, especially in mammals, you add internal pregnancy, lactation.
The female's commitment is just way higher.
Higher in terms of energy, time, risk. She becomes the scarce resource. And crucially, she's vulnerable if the male deserts her after mating.
Okay, so if she invests more, she gets to be picky. And the male, investing less.
He faces intense competition for access to those choosy females. But there's a flip side, too.
Which is?
The more a male invests in care, the more selective he should become.
Right, that makes sense. And this starts to explain those classic examples like the black grouse.
Spot on. A male black grouse might invest, 2 seconds in copulation?
Yeah.
And the female does everything else. Weeks incubating, months raising chicks. Trivers predicts she'll be choosy and dull-colored. He'll be competitive, eager, flashy.
And that's exactly what we see. But then you compare that to, say, red grouse.
Great contrast. The male red grouse invests a lot more, guards the female, sticks with the young for weeks, sometimes months.
So Trivers would predict.
Much less difference between the sexes, less sexual dimorphism. And again, that's what you find. They look much more similar.
So more male investment equals less flashy differences.
Generally, yeah. Though birds are interesting compared to mammals, male birds can incubate eggs. And neither sex lactates, mostly.
Except pigeons with their crop milk, apparently.
Right, good point. But the key thing is, significant male parental care is possible, which opens the door for
role reversal, if the male invests more.
The whole thing should flip. If he's the primary caregiver, he's the limited resource. Females should compete for him, and females should be bigger, brighter, more aggressive.
And the sources say this actually happens.
It does. About 36 bird species show this kind of sex role reversal. It's a fantastic natural test of Trivers' idea.
And the prime example seems to be the phalarope.
Oh, the phalaropes are amazing. Tiny shorebirds spend most of the year at sea, then dash up to the Arctic for this intense breeding frenzy.
And they're not very shy.
Famously unwary around their nests. Which is great for scientists, but yeah, their behavior initially confused people.
How so?
Well, you arrive at their breeding grounds and you see what looks like a leak. Brightly colored birds fighting, displaying aggressively.
Standard male leak, you'd think.
Right. But then you notice the duller birds are the ones being courted. And when they mate, the dull bird mounts the bright one.
Whoa. So the bright ones are?
The females. And the dull, choosy ones are the males. It's a female leak.
Mind blown. And Wallace noticed this pattern way back.
He did, back in 1870. He pointed out that in species where the female is flashier, it's usually the male doing the incubation. And that's true for all 3 phalarope species. Females are bigger, brighter, fight more.
And Trivers' theory just nails it.
It's a perfect fit. The male invests the most sitting on eggs for 2 weeks. He's the scarce resource. The operational sex ratio is skewed more available females than males ready to nest.
So the sex investing less, the female, fights over the sex investing more, the male.
And she becomes the decorated competitive one, just as the theory predicts.
They even have that weird courtship ritual, the female bowing, leading the male around.
Yeah, she's essentially auditioning nest sites for him, trying to convince him, hey, incubate my eggs here. It's all about securing his investment.
How did this reversal even evolve? Seems so counterintuitive.
Well, one plausible idea starts with ancestral sandpipers doing double clutching.
Meaning?
A female lays 1 clutch for the male to incubate, then maybe a second for herself. The step towards reversal could have been a female who laid for 1 male, then skipped laying for herself and found another male to lay for, then maybe a third. Serial polyandry.
So she just keeps laying eggs for different males to raise.
Exactly. Avoids the incubation cost entirely. If that worked, females who were good at finding and securing multiple males would be favored. That selects for females who are more competitive, maybe more aggressive.
Which could lead to higher testosterone, brighter colors.
Potentially, yes. And today's phalaropes fit that: bright females chasing dull males, leaving eggs, trying to find another mate.
Intense. But you mentioned a potential downside.
Yeah, if that history is right, the species might be only half as productive as a monogamous relative where both parents raise one brood. Could make them more vulnerable long term.
Okay, but there was a darker side you observed too. Something about aggression.
Yes, the strange driving flight. I saw male phalaropes, normally quite meek during courtship, furiously attacking other females near their nests.
Strange females, not their own mates.
It looked like strange females to me. Kiszczynski, another researcher, thought they were attacking their mates, but my observations didn't fit that.
And this connected to something with Jacanus, another role-reversed bird.
It did. I saw a documentary where a male jacana was viciously attacking a larger female near his nest, and the reason became horribly clear.
What was it?
She was trying to smash his eggs.
Female infanticide. Ugh.
Grim, isn't it? We know infanticide happens, male lions killing cubs, for instance, to bring females back into heat. In these role-reversed birds, it seems it's the females doing it, destroying another female's clutch to free up that incubating male for herself.
So those nests in your study that got destroyed, you thought it was predators, but maybe?
It's very likely it was other female phalaropes. It just reinforces Triver's point. You fight over the limiting resource. For phalaropes, that's incubating males. For black grouse, it's egg-laying females. The sex investing less competes and often gets beautified.
Okay, so Travers provided this powerful ecological logic. It made Darwin's sexual selection seem much more plausible. But the underlying theory, like Fisher's runaway idea, still needed stronger proof.
Yeah, the mathematical side needed shoring up to really convince everyone, and that's where Russell Land came in, around 1980. He used new, more sophisticated maths.
And he showed Fisher's runaway would work.
Yes, he built a detailed model showing that under reasonable genetic assumptions, the runaway process was a viable mechanism. It wasn't just a quirky idea.
And it could even lead to traits that weren't optimal for survival.
Absolutely. His model showed how a normal trait, like a regular tail, could get pulled by runaway selection towards something exaggerated, maybe even slightly harmful, like the black grouse's fancy tail.
And his work had a big impact.
Huge. John Maynard Smith championed it, called it a classic, and suddenly, female choice was really back in the mainstream, theoretically sound. For the third time, you could say, after Darwin and Fisher.
And Lander's model could explain why related species sometimes have really different males but similar females.
Right, because the runaway process can kind of shoot off in arbitrary directions once it starts. Different populations could evolve very different preferences and traits.
Mark Kirkpatrick's work added to this too.
Yes, he developed a simpler model that also showed the Fisher effect. The coevolution of preference and trait worked. Both Land and Kirkpatrick mathematically proved Fisher's intuition about the sexy son effect.
The idea that females choose attractive males mainly to have attractive sons.
Exactly. And Kirkpatrick came to this pretty startling conclusion.
Which was?
That theoretically, a random mutation causing a female preference for anything, even a trait that's almost lethal, could spread if it gets linked to that trait and gives her sexy sons, as long as both preference and trait are heritable.
Wow. That's like
Yeah.
breeding dogs purely for looks leading to health problems.
As it's a similar idea, yeah. Selection for desirability can override selection for practicality or health. The peacock's tail, again, costly, dangerous, but irresistible to peahens. It really cemented the idea that female choice could drive male traits into handicap territory.
Okay, but O'Donnell, going back to him, apparently had a lingering doubt about Fisher's argument, a non sequitur.
Yeah, later on he questioned, why would liking a trait automatically mean you prefer an exaggerated version? If you like a spot, why prefer a huge spot? It didn't seem logical to him.
But didn't psychology offer an answer? Supernormal stimuli.
Exactly. Nico Tinbergen's work was key here. He showed gulls prefer giant fake eggs over their own normal ones. Animals often respond more strongly to exaggerated versions of stimuli they're tuned into.
So a peahen is already wired to like peacock tails.
So an even bigger, brighter tail just pushes those same buttons harder. It doesn't require a new preference for exaggeration. That resolved O'Donnell's worry.
Right. So we've got the ecological theory from Travers, the mathematical proof from Land and Kirkpatrick. The next logical step was experiments.
Definitely. Theories are great, but you need real-world evidence to convince the doubters that female choice is actually a powerful force shaping evolution out there.
And Moulty Anderson stepped up, inspired by O'Donnell.
Yes. He wanted to test it experimentally. Apparently thought about peacocks first, but...
Bit tricky to catch and modify peacock tails.
You'd imagine. So he found a much better system, the long-tailed widow birds in Kenya.
Ah, yes, the ones with the incredibly long tails.
Exactly. Dull brown females, but jet black males with red shoulders and these ridiculously long tail streamers, way longer than their bodies.
And they display by flying slowly with these tails trailing.
Yes, defending territories, trying to attract females. They're polygynous, successful males get multiple females nesting. The tail is clearly crucial.
So Anderson did his famous experiment. What did he do?
Simple but brilliant. He caught 36 males, divided them up. Some got their tails shortened, some got theirs lengthened, using super glue to add the bits cut off the first group.
Super glue, love it. And controls.
Yep. One control group just got rings. Another had their tails cut and immediately glued back on at the original length, just to control for the handling stress.
Okay, so shortened, lengthened, and 2 controls. What happened when he released them?
The results were stunningly clear. The males with the artificially lengthened tails attracted way more females, almost twice as many nests on average compared to controls.
And the short-tailed ones?
They attracted significantly fewer nests, less than half the average of controls.
Wow. Undeniable.
Absolutely. Making the tail longer made the males sexier. Direct experimental proof validating Fisher's runaway idea, females driving ornaments beyond practical size, and the supernormal stimulus idea. Females preferred tails even longer than normally occur.
That Nature paper must have made a splash.
Oh, it was huge. A landmark study. Made Anderson's career, really.
So, okay, we know female choice exaggerates traits, but why are females choosing these traits? What's the actual benefit? That led to the next big debate, right?
Exactly. The 90s saw this big focus on mechanism. Is it good genes or sexy sons?
Explain those again quickly.
Good genes. The fancy trait signals the male is genuinely high quality, healthy, strong, parasite resistant. Choosing him gives your offspring better survival genes, sexy sons. The trait might not signal anything about health, but it's attractive. Choosing him means your sons inherit the attractiveness and get more mates themselves.
So health versus herited hotness, basically.
Pretty much. And the stalk-eyed fly became a key model for this.
The ones with eyes on stalks.
Bizarre.
Totally bizarre. Males fight using their eye span, wider wins, and females prefer males with wider eye spans. You can even breed female lions that prefer long or short stalks.
Which supports Fisher's idea of the genetic link between trait and preference.
It does. But even there, teasing apart good genes from sexy sons proved really difficult. They found other weird stuff, like maybe females avoid short-stalked males because they carry a gene that messes up the sex ratio of offspring.
Complicated. So how do you directly test good genes versus sexy sons? It seems almost impossible.
You'd need to track mate choice, then meticulously follow the offspring, measure their survival and health, good genes, and measure the attractiveness of the sons to the next generation, sexy son.
Tough in birds, but possible in something faster breeding.
Exactly. Enter the sandfly, Lutzomia longipelpis from Brazil. A sandfly. Okay.
It's perfect. They have leks. Males display with wing fluttering, singing, pheromones. Females visit, check out the males, choose one, mate, lay eggs. Females are clearly in charge. And you can recreate the whole leak system in the lab.
Ah, okay. That sounds promising.
It was the setup for a truly groundbreaking experiment by Teresa Jones, supervised by Andrew Balmford.
What did they do?
They set up lab leks, let virgin females choose males, noting who was popular, who wasn't. Then, crucially, they took the least attractive males, the losers, and made new leks consisting only of these guys.
Okay.
Then they let other females choose from these loser leks. So now they had 2 groups of females, those who mated with inherently attractive males, and those forced to choose the best of the worst.
Right. Then they tracked the kids.
Precisely. They followed 186 offspring from both groups, measured everything. Did the mums survive better or lay more eggs? Direct benefit. Did her kids survive better, grow faster? Were daughters better breeders? Good genes. And the killer question, were the sons of females who chose attractive dads themselves more attractive to new females? Sexy son.
Okay. The moment of truth. What did they find?
The results were incredibly clear-cut. 0 evidence for direct benefits to the female. 0 evidence for good genes offspring of attractive males were no healthier or more fecund.
What?
The sons of females who chose attractive males were massively more attractive to the next generation than sons of females who chose unattractive males.
Oh, so sexy son wins.
In this experiment, in this species, yes. The Darwin-Fisher sexy son hypothesis won, hands down. Now, it doesn't rule out every possible subtle good genes effect, maybe disease resistance not tested in the lab.
Sure.
But the major predictions. Sexy son was strongly supported, good genes wasn't.
So for these flies, the benefit of having attractive sons who'll get lots of mates outweighed any potential benefit from getting better survival genes.
It strongly suggests that, yes, that indirect fitness benefit, getting lots of grandkids via your sexy sons, can be the primary driver of female choice, powering that runaway selection for traits that are mainly just desirable.
What a journey. From Darwin's hunch about beauty, dismissed for decades, then rescued by Tryver's logic, backed by maths, and finally proven in action with superglue and flies in a lab.
Looking back through the sources, you really see how science works, don't you? The arguments, the dead ends, the clever experiments needed to figure this stuff out.
So, the takeaway for you, the listener. Think about that peacock's tail. Or maybe even human fashions, trends, certain traits we find desirable. Could some things be attractive mainly because other people find them attractive?
Could preference itself kickstart a runaway process where attractiveness becomes the main currency, maybe even sometimes at the expense of practicality or health?
It raises fascinating questions about what shapes appearance and behavior, not just in animals, but maybe closer to home, too.
Yeah.
How much is driven simply by the power of being desired?
Definitely something to chew on.
Indeed. Well, thank you for bringing us these fantastic sources.